Hi, my name's Duncan and I'm a software developer, and today I'd like to share with you a small part of a bigger talk that I have about reusable web components and design tokens. And for us, the reason we're using web components is for this reason, that we need to be able to run a web component like this My Dash button in lots of different places. We need to be able to run it in Angular or React or in a content management system, all sorts of different places. And not only do we have that challenge, but we also need to sometimes run them all on the same page with micro front ends. So we might have a content management system as the shell of application that's using this blue web component button, but we might also have a micro front end in Angular as feature 1 here using the same blue button. And also in feature 2, we might have a React micro front end using that same blue button. So web components, being a web standard, help us have these reusable components that we can use in many different platforms. But what I'd like to talk about is this other thing that we have been doing that helps us with reusable styles, and that's design tokens. Because if your company decides that they need to change one of their fundamental styles, let's say their branding color here from a blue button to a green button, then how does that actually happen? Normally in a big organization, what will happen is the developer will go find the style guide that could be a PDF or a design tool and copy and paste that over into the code base for these web components. But the challenge is there might be other teams like the mobile team that also need that color, and then when the design docs change or the PDF changes, how do you get that green color again, and so forth. So what we've been using is design tokens, and they look like this. They're a key value pair, and you would have something like a color-primary set to that blue color. And these are versioned like normal code, and they're agnostic of platform, so you could compile them down to iOS, Android, or for web. So you could simply just update that color to be green, bump the version, and then everyone who wants this new version of this color can just npm install or get it from the package manager, and they're ready to go. So this is how we actually put our tokens into code. We use something called a DSP, or a design system package from Adobe. And this is a GUI that you can use inside of Visual Studio Code with a plugin, and allows you to author your design tokens. And then they can compile down, as I said, different versions. So what that would look like is you have this DSP, this central place to put all of these design tokens. They're agnostic of platforms. And then you can put it in a package manager, run it through normal CI/CD, version control, all of those things. And then that will be able to be installed into different places or different even platforms. So the web team could grab those design tokens that are agnostic of platform and then get them as CSS variables or Sass variables. And then all of the different teams that want those can get access to those. And if the DSP updates that from a blue to a green, they can just get the latest version or flow all the way down. And the reason it's important to be in a central place is because if we put it all the way down in one of these teams code bases, then when they update, it doesn't flow back upstream to all the other teams. So for example, in large organizations, it's very common to have a big mobile team for both iOS, Android, and maybe even Flutter or something like that. And then all of those teams would also need that update. So you need to get it upstream into a central place like a DSP, that then you can transform it down into all these other places and have good source control and management as you would expect from any code. Another challenge that web components are helping us solve is the ability to have isolated CSS. So in what web components will give us is something called shadow DOM. So the shadow DOM is an isolated DOM tree separate from the light DOM or the normal DOM. So we would have a web component, and inside the HTML tree for that web component would be completely isolated from the other ones. So we're going to have a look at this really quickly in code and see how it all works. So let's jump in. I'm going to jump over into Visual Studio Code here. I am using Stencil as a component library. So what you can see here is a very simple stencil component. And it's got a tag of my component, and it's pointing to a style sheet, myComponent.css. And all it does is return a p tag that says hello and the variable this.name. So if we were to go over to the index.html, how you would stick that on the HTML would look like this. You would just say my-component, just like any component library, and then the name is Duncan. And if we go over and look at the actual HTML for this, it would look like so. And over here, if I was to inspect this hello Duncan, what you'll see is it's inside of this my dash component. And this part here, this P element, is inside the shadow DOM. So CSS can't bleed across. So at the moment, this P tag is black. But if I was to go back over to Visual Studio Code and I was to have a global style block like this, and I was to uncomment this, let me just come up here and do this. Now, that jump back over, you'll see it's still black. That P tag should really be styled if we inspect it closely. This P tag here should be styled, but because of the shadow DOM, it won't be, which is good. That's what we want. If I was to come over and just uncomment this P tag in the light DOM, it will get styled to pink. So when we come back over, we can see that that's going to be pink and the rest of it won't be, because we've got this nice CSS encapsulation here. But what if we did want to style this? Well, then being shadow DOM, you're going to be dependent on a new web standard called CSS variables. So I could come back over into the code and I can uncomment this root tag here where I'm using a CSS variable. You can see by this double dash in the front, and I'm setting it to blue. So now this will be able to cross over into the shadow DOM of this web component. And if we look at the CSS file for it, I'm just setting the color using the var function to that primary color token. Well, it's not a token yet, it's just a CSS variable. So if we go have a look at that, then we can see that it's blue. So this is all good. This is how we do web components. We do CSS encapsulation. We go into it a lot more detail normally. But if we wanted to get this from the DSP, how would we do that? How would we get this from a central place? So I have another repository here, which is here. And what we can see, this is a different repository. It's a different version of Visual Studio Code. And we have that Adobe plugin that I was talking about. And I've just made one design token. So it's separate from the web component application. And I've just said that I've got this primary dash color token that's set to green. So it's now a different color. And when I save this, it's going to output over here to CSS and also to something like Flutter for a Flutter app. So if we look at that CSS variable file, it's just got that one primary color of green. So we could then go back to our original app and npm install this, which I've already done. So I'll just go back. And I've already gone and done that. I've npm installed it into this project. So if we look at the package JSON, I've just manually done it locally. So here's this DSP demo, and that would have a version on it. Here it's version 1. And then I can go over into the index.html and just add that as a regular style sheet. And it's going to win on specificity because it's just ahead of this one, or it's after this one. And then now this is coming from a completely different repository that can be versioned and installed. And if we go back over, we'll see that it's now green. So this is a really simple little demo of some of these pieces, but in a really large organization with hundreds of sites across many different platforms, having these sort of tooling in place can really improve your consistency. So thanks for watching, and that's all I've got to share today.